And by publishing, it allows you, in some fashion, it allows you to contribute to the body of knowledge, but also to get feedback on what you've done, maybe build your reputation or find others interested in the problem. And importantly, it puts a timestamp on your work you've got out there, because I think a lot of hacker community research just is not well known in certain circles, and it's incredibly powerful, and it's almost dismissed, or it's pulled into research without properly citing it. And it's getting things out there puts a timestamp on it and will help prevent that. And the idea of reproducibility, creating things that you leave behind. And history is replete with technologies that we no longer know how to do them. The Stradivarius violins are probably the best example. Just those technologies are lost, and we're trying to avoid that. Research papers provide a useful way to think about problems, whether you're reading them or trying to write them, or even thinking about a way to structure a talk on a subject. It's a time-tested way to think about problems and to create artifacts. Whether you write them or not, it's just a useful outline, though. And it starts off with the background and motivation. That's the who cares, why, and so what of the problem. And it gets into related work, what other people have done. So in this one package, this capsule, they're telling you what other people have done and why theirs is different. And then the core of it, the design, implementation, evaluation of some activity, system, or experiment. And it wraps up with future work. Again, they're pointing you toward the future. And importantly, references. So you can go back, as you're trying to dig deeply into an area, you can find out what references they use to build theirs. And you might find new ones. And you'll find, as you explore an area, eventually you'll find everything that's been done. And it might just be 10 or 20 different little papers or articles. And then all of a sudden you've got a pretty good understanding of the state of the art. And as you seek to publish, there's many different forums. I think great places to start are magazines, maybe writing a book chapter, serving as a technical reviewer for a book even, serving on panels and talks, or writing white papers. Those are all things that are accessible. And in academia, there's a hierarchy. Poster sessions, these ideas, you create a poster, you stand in a room, and a bunch of people who have interest in the area wander through eating a cookie or something, giving you free advice on your work. And you kind of see some of that going on here. There's an analog here. And it goes, the idea then, as you go up this hierarchy, you refine the idea more and more. And then it goes to, say, a technical report that's self-published, maybe a workshop where people dig into a particular problem, and then more general conferences, and then a journal, which is supposed to be this archival thing. So that's the academic model. If you're thinking about writing academic papers, I'd strongly, or like a research paper in a workshop or something like that that's academic, I strongly encourage you to work with someone like a grad student, because in academia, there's almost like this code, there's this writing style, this way of discussing things. It's not necessarily intuitive, but that's what they're learning. So it can be frustrating if you don't have that. The work can be awesome, but sometimes you'll just get reviewers that it's foreign to them and they don't understand. Just trust me. And then at the bottom right, I've got just a few venues that I respect and I think might be open to hackerish type research. Usenix Leet, the First Monday, the open publication format journal, IEEE Security and Privacy magazine, Make magazine, and then the whole hacker scene magazines like 2600 and many others. And as you think about, say, academic security conferences, there's about 100 of them, and they vary in quality. And probably the best example of that who's familiar with the MIT students that built the automatic paper generator? Right? Yeah, that was a pretty good hack there. So they wrote a paper that they had a database of papers, and this thing would just randomly take snippets and create, using the exact right format and structure, just gibberish papers. And they got Rooter accepted at WMSCI 2005. And then it got, I thought that was awesome, because there's some forums out there you really don't want your name associated with. And regardless of where you're trying to publish, it's good to do some reconnaissance or some research. Imagine trying to come to an event like DEF CON for the first time and then speaking at it. It could be, if you don't understand the context. So it's useful to do some research on where you're thinking about publishing, either online, if it's, or off, or in person. You can even self-publish. There's a great talk, Self-Publishing in the Underground, from DEF CON 15 that talks about self-publishing strategies. Or you might want to work with a publisher on a book at some point. And a question that comes up is, well, how are the calculations for royalties made? And I thought I'd just include an example in here. And this is ballpark, but I checked with the publisher 2 days ago just to double check my math, and agreed with me. So if the cover of a book is $50, the publisher may sell that book typically for $25 or so to a company like Amazon, to a distributor. Then you're given a percentage of what the publisher makes, which is ballpark 12% of the $25. So on a $50 book, the author may make $3 per book. Then the question is, are you going to sell 100,000 copies and pay off your mortgage, or are you going to sell 3,000 copies and buy a Stairmaster? Well, frankly, the advice I got from the publisher I was talking to said, really, you don't expect to get rich. I mean, 3,000, 5,000 copies, a pretty good run for a book. People have exceeded that, and there are 100,000. I think Steal This Computer book, for example, went over 100,000. But it's just good to know, $50 book, $3. But there's other benefits, right, by doing this. You create a long-term artifact. You gain perhaps some reputation, some exposure that'll bring in consulting gigs or media opportunities. And ultimately, though, you have to do a lot of marketing yourself if you want to really push it up and over. For me, it took 14 months of free time for each book. Your mileage may vary. So some parting thoughts. Don't self-censor. Good research is also often disruptive to the status quo, and I think the hacker community excels at that. So don't be afraid to choose something that's controversial. Be fearless when you can. Develop a sense for open problems, and that comes by knowing a space. And many in the hacker community do that. You're already doing research, right? You develop a sense for open problems, where the holes are, and you can share them with others or work on them yourself. Also, develop a sense for important problems. It's how, so now you know the open problems, but how do you prioritize them? And Richard Hamming wrote or I believe it was a talk called You and Your Research. And he was talking about Nobel Prize-winning work, but I think it still applies for everybody to think about. What are the most important problems in your field? Are you working on one of them? If not, why not? So it's a good way to think about it. It's a bit pretentious, but it's a good way to think about these things. And my most favorite quote from this talk is from Paul Graham about procrastination. The most impressive people I know are all procrastinators. They put off working on small stuff to work on big stuff. And I think that's important. When you go back to that chunks of time you can actually get anything done, I mean, if you just stay on the email treadmill all day, you'll accomplish nothing. So I know programmers that shut down their email and their instant messaging or whatever to be able to focus on a problem, maybe unplug the phone. But we have to ignore the silly stuff, otherwise it'll eat all of our time. Of course, the silly stuff may be important to our employers, and you can't be totally ignored, but it's important to think about. It's also, balance is important. How much do you input? How much knowledge do you absorb? Because some people just absorb, and they're brilliant, but they don't output anything. And how much coding do you do? How much processing do you do of the data? So finding a balance that you learn things, you do something with them, and then you output things is a balance you have to seek. And this was suggested by my friend Sergey, that DEF CON, Black Hat, all the major hacker conferences, textfiles.com, have tremendous archives available. But where it's almost to the point now, it's so rich, there's so much information out there that it's hard to find. You say, what was that talk on, I tried for this, there's this great talk on media relations that I was trying to find to mention. And it was at Hope, I think, and I don't remember, and it's like every other year, and you're trying to find this. So as we look to the future, maybe we can see a search engine created, or like a library that points to these documents. It's tagged with metadata, and it's searchable in some way. Also, playing to your strengths, right? So academia follows the grant money like dogs on a hunt sometimes. Industry, you have to make a case for the bottom line. But hackers, you've got many advantages. Passion, you know the real world problems, right? Oftentimes that aren't known in academia. You have perhaps time. You may be fearless. You may be immune to the law in certain ways. You may be obsessed, or you have a diverse background, or diverse friends, or diverse access to data. Those are all strengths that can be leveraged. It's also important to fight uninformed law, and this comes from FX and some of his colleagues' Phenolit website. It says, "Honored visitor, much to our regret, this site is no longer available in the form it has been since the late 1990s. It became illegal." So we have to, if you're into security research, you got to watch the law in your country to make sure it's not going, and do what you can to fight back, because there's a lot of benefits to hacker research. A strategy can be finding inspiration in others you respect, whoever they may be. Sometimes they'll have an online presence, and you can look and say, how did this person do these things? And you can follow what they've done. Or just people who don't have online presence, but you just respect them. You can talk to them about how they did what they did. So, not my car. I wish it was. Wikimedia Commons, again, has pictures of Ferraris. But the license plate was actually real. I saw it at a conference in Washington, a security conference in Washington, and I was in the parking garage. Didn't know if I was in the right place, because I was a little lost. And I pulled in the parking garage and parked next to the NOP sled. I knew I was in the right place. And the journey itself has many dividends, right? Whether you find the cure for cancer or not, you learn so much along the way and maybe make some contributions. And Donald Rumsfeld, very famous for his quotes on knowing what you know and don't know and the like. But the key idea is some of the smartest people I know aren't afraid to ask questions. And I try to do the same, and I encourage you to ask questions too. And this picture, you may wonder why there's a picture of cats and ducks, but that's what Google thinks happy is. So I searched on happy, and then this was one of the top ones, and I thought it's fine. There were some other happy things in there that I didn't want to put in to the slides. But kittens and ducks is probably safe. But here the idea is, don't let this search for novelty, the critics, the reviewers that may give you a hard time because they don't get what you're doing, or some frustrations in publishing, get in the way of good hacking and fun, right? That's what it's all about. Life's short. So the final thing is, this is doable. The research space isn't as crowded as you'd think. And there's incredibly talented people here. So just encouraging you to go out and dig in, and this is a doable thing. Don't be like me and think you can't do it. Lots of people to thank. And I've also, these will be posted on the website, but, this is a list of papers on that, if you're thinking about publishing, there's some ideas here, and some books on problem solving that I've looked at or read and recommend. Okay, so I can't see, no one's giving me, I think I've got about 7 minutes. So any questions? My website is, it's gregconti.com. It's cheesy, yes, gregconti.com. But it'll also be up on the Black Hat website.